Good morning. And this morning I probably should be talking about E3 and everybody else is talking about E3. And this has some bearing on E3, I think, because it's to do with backwards compatibility. And I think we'll probably see some more stuff from Microsoft about backwards compatibility over the next few days and some more stuff on Game Pass. And I think Game Pass is going to incorporate a lot of the backwards compatible games over time. But why am I talking about backwards compatibility? Well, two things. There was a story broke, I think, last week, and there was an interview in Time with Sony's head of global marketing and sales, a guy called Jim Ryan, and he said, "We've dabbled with backwards compatibility, and I can say it is one of those features that is much requested, but not actually used much." And, you can understand him wanting to spin this because obviously Xbox offers backwards compatibility, whereas PlayStation doesn't, basically. Obviously, we've got PS Now, but that's a different proposition altogether. So, I'm thinking, okay, he's spinning this. But then this last week, we get some data coming out of Arstechnica, and they've taken a look at backwards compatibility and they've gone through some of the data. Now I'll get to issues about the data in a bit, but first off, let's just put up what they've shown in a pie chart, and I'll put that on the screen as well. And they say Xbox One users largely ignore backward compatible Xbox 360 games. And their data seems to confirm this. And they've got Xbox One games usage is 54.7%, Netflix is 16.5%, the TV app is 6.7%, and as an aside there, I actually use the TV app to play my 360, so don't know if I'm in the figures, but that might skew it a bit, minimally. And then YouTube is 6.6%, and other apps, non-gaming apps, are 14.1%. But the one little figure in there, the one little slither of the pie, is Xbox 360 backwards compatible games, and they account for a measly 1.5%. But I looked at this and I thought, well, yeah, that does look small, and, well, it is small. But the figures didn't look quite right to me, and the first thing I noticed was obviously 1.5% is as a picture of the overall pie. And okay, yeah, that's fair enough. And like I say, I will get to some of the issues with the data itself in a minute. But if you look at this 1.5% and then you say, well, okay, let's discard Netflix, let's discard the TV app and YouTube and all the other stuff and just look at games. And I did I was going to say a quick calculation, but my maths is not that great and I had to spend a little bit of time on it and draft in a friend of mine who's a maths teacher. And I did a little calculation, and when you actually look at games as 100% of the pie, obviously those figures are going to change. And I came up with the Xbox 360 games as a proportion of overall gameplay is more like somewhere around about 2.7%, heading towards 3%. So that's almost double. Well, it is double. 3%, 2.73% is, still a small number, but it is significantly more when you just look at it in terms of games. And I think if you're talking about gameplay, and that's what we're talking about here, then that's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at the percentage of gameplay that Xbox 360 games account for. And okay, it's interesting to look at it as the overall picture, but when you look at the overall picture, you've got Netflix at 16.5%, which is, wow, it's very significant. And, you will have game players who are not using those apps. And some of those people won't be online. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute as well. The figures actually, though, when you start to look at them in more detail, are pretty much all over the place. And offline figures don't even factor into it. Basically, if you look at the data here, it's very hard to trust it. And let me explain why. Here's a direct quote. This is what Arstechnica say. Unfortunately, a large number of offline Xbox users simply cannot be reached using this Xbox Live-based sampling method. Any Xbox owners that never connect to Microsoft's online service don't even have a gamer tag that could show up in our sample. That probably means online multiplayer games are a bit overrepresented in our sample, while strictly single-player games might be undercounted. Then they go on to say, how big is this online-offline skew? Well, Microsoft said in 2006 that 60% of Xbox 360 users took their systems online. In 2011, 63% of 55 million Xbox 360 systems in the wild had an Xbox Live account. Even if the online portion of the Xbox user base has continued to grow in the years since, that still leaves a hefty chunk of Xbox owners we're missing. And we have no idea if those offline users act similarly to those that have Xbox Live. And then we get to this. Even if every Xbox user was online all the time though, our data probably couldn't be used to directly estimate precise sales numbers for individual games. If they can't be used to estimate sales numbers for individual games, well, I suggest that probably we're going to run into the same problem when it comes to working out backwards compatibility versus Xbox One games. I don't know about you, but that seems to be a reasonable assumption here. And the problem is, we are dealing with assumption. And that's the problem with these figures. This 1.5% of backwards compatible games usage can't really be trusted. And that's not Arstechnica's fault. That's just the nature of the limits of the data they have available. So whether you're looking at 1.5% of the overall picture or 2.73% of the game usage, when you start to factor in the discrepancies in the data, and I'll put a link into the actual article and I suggest you read it for yourselves, you start to realize that you can't really trust this data. It's very, very difficult to come to any real conclusion. And the one area where I would criticize Arstechnica here is in their headline. And the headline, to repeat, said, Xbox One users largely ignore backward compatible Xbox 360 games. But if you go on and you look at what they're saying themselves about their own data, then, well, like I say, that's not actually what you can draw from these figures. What you can actually draw from these figures is that the figures are unreliable. And this is what Arstechnica themselves say. This isn't me saying this. Let me quote something else. They go on to say, where we're able to test these skewing effects directly, they appear not to be insignificant. Not to be insignificant. But they go even further than that. They say, then there are the usual margin of error considerations caused by taking a small random sample of the entire Xbox Live universe. They also add, all of these sources of potential error make us uncomfortable using our data to directly extrapolate total sales or usage numbers for the entire Xbox player base. The numbers and ratios represented in this report should only be considered representative. And we all know about representative figures, don't we? With the NPD data that we've been getting over the years suggesting that there was a crash coming in gaming or whatever, and then when it turns out that they've got the digital sales, actually what's happening is that game sales are increasing, and I could have probably told them that. But digital sales account for a lot more than we thought. And what's going on here is difficult to actually say. Whether the numbers of people using backwards compatibility are as low as Arstechnica is suggesting, or whether these figures are so far removed from reality that they're not giving us any real picture, is open to debate. But I would suggest that we need to be very, very careful. And I know I keep saying this, but we need to be very, very careful about these figures when they're incomplete, and I would go so far as to say they're not even really representative. backwards compatible figures may be very low. They may be a lot higher than is being suggested here. We simply don't know. And I think the only people who probably know are Microsoft themselves. And when you actually get Microsoft talking about this, they're saying that the uptake is quite high. And there is some evidence that would back that up as well. When you consider that these figures don't take into account Black Ops 2, and that Black Ops 2 went into the charts again, I think it went in at number 10, and this wasn't Xbox charts, this was cross-platform charts. When this game came out on backwards compatibility, there was a huge spike. And it would suggest to me that when you're getting games that are very popular coming onto backwards compatibility, then people are playing them and people are downloading them, people are going into shops and buying secondhand copies, so on and so forth. The data seems to support that. And again, obviously, I've already mentioned sales figures and we should take those with a pinch of salt as well. All I'm saying here is be wary of the data because it's not really reliable, is it? But that's what I think. I don't know what you guys think. Come and let me know in the comments and we'll have a chat about this. Do you think that Sony's right? Do you think it's a waste of time? Do you think Microsoft are correct to have implemented this backwards compatibility? I certainly do. But everyone's got their opinion. Let's have a chat about it. And in the meantime, I'm going to go and lie down in a dark room and prepare for E3. I'll speak to you in the next one. Bye.